Hey, you can always get your, you can join YouTube, you can still be getting your the recorded classes if you want to follow them. So I'll send you the link. So I usually save, when I don't forget, I usually save the classes in YouTube. Okay, do you have any question on the homework? Do we have any question on the homework? Okay, so let's continue from where we are. So today we're going to look at it. Actually, this topic, this chapter 7, chapter 6 is 9.69, chapter 6, chapter 9, sorry. It's actually dealing with the quadratic equations on how to solve them. So the first one, we use the square root property. So which we did on Wednesday. So today we're going to use the completing squares, the completing squares method, the completing squares method. Okay, now if we can recall, this. Say a plus b square is similar to a square plus 2ab plus what? B square, right? So we said that this equals to now, now if we have this a and all this, we have a square plus 2ab plus b square. Then we want to get a plus b squared. So how can we do that? So here we will use what we call the completing squares method. The completing squares method. Squares method. So here, since we have a square plus 2ab, a square plus 2ab, then to get the next one here, to get the next value there, then we actually have the coefficient of, so this is actually similar to getting half the coefficient of x. The coefficient in this case, half the coefficient of this x here, and then we square it. So it's the same as getting half of 2b, and then we square that square it. Okay, together there. So if you look at this, then our coefficient of a square here is 1. Our coefficient of a here is what? 2b, right? Is 2b. Our coefficient of a here is 2. So when you take half of that coefficient of 2b here, then what you get in this case is a squared plus 2ab plus 1. That and that will go. So b1 is this one, this one. And therefore, this is now similar to a plus b. This is now similar to a plus b squared, which is this. The same thing happens to a squared minus 2ab plus b squared. A squared minus 2ab plus b squared. So in this case, this is similar to a squared minus 2, let's say ba, plus you take the half the coefficient of a here, and the coefficient of a here is what? Minus what? Minus 2a, minus 2b, sorry. And then you do what? You square. So then this is equals to a squared minus 2ba plus what? Half that one minus b squared, which is equals to a squared minus 2ba plus what? Plus b squared. And this is the same as what? A minus b. A minus b squared. A minus b squared. A minus b squared. Now, in completing squares, then there are several steps to follow. There are some few steps to follow here. Completing squares. Now, if the coefficient of x is 1, x squared is 1. Now, if we have x squared plus bx, if we have that x squared plus bx, where the coefficient here is 1, then the following steps are to be followed. Solving using completing squares. Number 1, identify b, where b is the coefficient of x, where b is the coefficient of x, the coefficient of x. Our b here is the coefficient of x, and our b here is what? Plus b. Number 2, find a half b squared. Find a half b squared. And this one is the number to complete the squares. The number to complete the squares. Number 3, add the half b squared to x squared plus bx, add half b square to x square plus bx. And then number 4, factor the perfect square trinomial, writing it as binomial squared. Writing it as binomial squared. So these are the steps that you need to follow. So identify b, and that b is the coefficient of x, and then find half that b, and then you square it. After that, then you add to that expression x squared plus bx, and then factor the perfect square trinomial, writing it as squared. So what does it mean? So if we have our x squared plus bx here, then we identify our b, and our b here is this. Then we do what? We have b, and then we do what? Square. After doing that, then we come and add it here. So x squared plus bx plus half. So this forms a trinomial. It forms a trinomial. It forms a trinomial. Then, therefore, this and this forms a perfect square. It forms a perfect square. Now, since this one is a trinomial, then it forms a perfect square. Therefore, we write, now we factor the perfect square trinomial, writing it as a binomial squared. So this is a perfect square, and this one is also a perfect square. And this is in trinomial. Now you write it, you now factor the perfect square trinomial, writing it as binomial square. That means you factor this, which is x, and this one, the all of this, which is, and this one is actually plus 1/2. And then you do what? Square. Square. Okay. Square. Now, if it is of the form, now if it is of the form x squared plus bx plus c equals to 0. Now, if now it is if it is now a quadratic equation, now how will we use the completing squares here? How will we use the completing squares? So what we do here, since the coefficient of x squared is 1, then the first step here is number 1, isolate the variables terms on one side and constant on the other side. Now, in this case, we have x squared plus bx plus c equals to 0. So we need to isolate the variables and the constant. So we now take the constant to the other side, which is now x squared plus bx equals to what? C. equals to minus c. Now, after isolating that, then this now becomes like this. It is now similar to this one here. It is now similar to this. So we follow the next steps. Follow the next steps. So number 2, find a half b and then you square. And then add to both sides. Find half b and then you square, and then you add to both sides. So here we have our b here. So x squared plus bx equals minus c. And our b, we get it from the coefficient of x. The coefficient of x. So our b here is now, we now get half our what? And then we do what? We square. Then we add this one to both sides. So x squared plus bx plus 1 over 2b squared equals minus c plus 1 over 2b squared. So we add to both sides. So that is the second step. The third one, factor, just like what we did above, factor the perfect square, perfect trinomial, and then writes its as a binomial squared on the left. Now factor the perfect trinomial, write it as a binomial squared on the left. Just like what you've done previously, then we factor. This is now a trinomial. Then we factor the perfect square, and then we do what? We write them on the left. So in this case, it is x and our what? Plus 1 over 2b. Then you do what? We square. And this one is equals to minus c plus 1 over 2b square. So that is the third step. Now from there, if we still remember what we did in section 9.1, then we use the what? We use the what? What is followed from there? We do what?
Square root.
Yes, we use the square root. Perfect. So from there, number 4, we use a square. Use the square root. Now, in this case, it will now be x plus 1 over 2b will now be equals to plus or minus the square root of what? Minus c plus 1 over 2b squared. 2b squared. Then therefore, our x will be what? We take this one to the other side, minus 1 over 2b plus or minus the square root of minus c plus 1 over 2b squared. And that is our solution. That is our solution. It's our solution. Any question after that? Any question? Now, if the coefficient coefficient of number 3. Now, if we have if it is of the form, if the quadratic quotient is of the form ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. If it is of that form, then here, what you do, first step is divide by a to make a coefficient of x squared to be so you make sure that the coefficient of x squared is 1. The coefficient of x squared is 1. So you divide each one of them by 8. So here it will now be x squared plus b all over a x plus c all over a equals to what? 0 all over a is what? Then from there now, you use the steps that you have done in the second section. So here, number 2, using these steps here, find now half the what? Coefficient of x. And what is our coefficient of x here? What is the coefficient of x? What is the coefficient of x? What is the coefficient of x? 1. What is the coefficient of x? The coefficient of x here is what? No, before that, isolate number 2 here. Isolate the variables and constant. So whereby it will now be x squared plus b all over ax equals minus what? C all over a. Isolates the variables. Then from there now, you find half the coefficient of x and half the coefficient of x. Our coefficient of x here is b all over a, half of it, and then you do what? You square half of it, and then you square half of it, and then you square. Then number 4, and then you do what? And add to both sides. Add to both sides, which is giving us number 4, which is x squared plus b all over ax plus half is b all over 2a squared equals to minus c all over a plus b all over 2a squared. B all over 2a squared. Now from there, on this side now, it is this is b all over 2a. So from there now, that is a trinomial on the left. You write it. It's now becoming a perfect. So Plus the square root of this and the square root of this. The perfect binomial. Right. That. Now we write it in binomial, which will now be what? X plus what? B all over 2a, and then we do what? Which is equals to minus c all over a plus b all over 2a squared. So from there now, you use the what? You use the square root property. The square root property. Square root property. So number 5, use the square root. Or it becomes x plus b all over 2a equals to plus or minus the square root of minus c all over a plus b all over 2a squared. And finally, number 6, our solution x equals to, take this one to the other side, minus b all over 2a plus or minus the square root of minus c all over a plus b all over 2a squared. That is our solution. That is basically.
If it's squared, why is it inside of the square root?
Which one is that?
The b over 2a.
So it is this. So what you do here, you add here the same b over 2a squared, and then you also add here b over 2a squared. Okay, you add it on both sides. So the next step is this. Now we pick this one and this one. So it is x plus b all over 2a, which is half the coefficient of x. Now it forms a binomial square. So you square it and then equals to minus c all over a plus b all over 2a, which is still remaining there. Now using the square root property here, so you remove this square root, the square here, by getting the what? The square. And then you remember the square root property. Then when you find the square root of this, then it is equals to plus or minus the square root of the other side. Then now you take this one to what? This side, which is minus b plus or minus this one. Okay. So basically, this is the quadratic formula. This is actually a quadratic. If you remember the quadratic formula. So once we go to the next step, the next section is solving the quadratic equation using the quadratic formula. So this is a formula. I'll show you again how we can formulate that quadratic formula. Okay, now example number 1. Example. Complete the square to make perfect the square trinomial. Then write the result is binomial squared of this one, m squared minus 13 m squared minus 13. Now complete the square, make perfect square, then write the result as a binomial. So that is so it is of this form. It's of this form. It is of that form. So the first step is we do what? Identify. So number one, identify the coefficient of m. The coefficient of m. Identify the coefficient of m. So what is the coefficient of m? 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 Negative 1. 13. So the coefficient of m is 13. Then we do what? Then we have the coefficient of what? M. So we have the coefficient of m, which is negative 13. It's negative 13. Then we do what? Square. Then we square. Square. So this is actually the same as negative 13 all over 2 square. Negative 13 all over 2 square. Okay. So number two, we do what? We add this coefficient to this equation. So we add negative 13 all over 2 square to m square minus 13, which will form m square minus 13m plus negative 13 all over 2 square, negative 13 all over 2 square. Are we together after that? Are we clear? Is it clear? So this now becomes a what? An offset. Now let's write it in a binomial square. So what is our binomial square? It will now be m, and then what? What next? M and then yes, minus 13 over minus 13 over 2 square. So that is now a binomial square. And that is it. So we have written it in trinomial perfect square, and then this is now a binomial square. This is a trinomial. This is actually perfect square. Trinomial. Perfect square. Hey, so are we together after that? Now, another example on the same. Another example on the same. Let's say we are given q square minus q all over 4. And then you are told to complete the square to make perfect square trinomial. Complete the square to make perfect square trinomial. Then write the result in binomial squared. In binomial squared. So now, first step, identify the coefficient of what? The coefficient of Q. What is the coefficient of Q? It is equals to
1/4.
1 is equals to -1 over what? Then we do what? We half it, right? We take half and then we square. So -1/4. Half of this is multiplied by what? 2. And then we do the square, which is similar to -1/8 square. -1/8 square. Now from there, we do what? We come and add it here. Q square minus Q/4 plus -1/8. So now that is the perfect square trinomial. That is a perfect square trinomial. So we write it in a binomial square. And this will be what? Q.
-1/8.
Yes, -1/8. 1/8 square. And that is it. That is it. That is it. Now, if we are now given the equation of the form, let's say a square minus 6a minus 25 equals to 0. Using the completing squares. So how would we use the completing squares? So this is like the second step that we did. So what you do is what? We isolate the variables and the constant. So that means we take -25 to the other side. So a square minus 6a equals to 25. So that is the first step. Isolate variables. Number 2, identify the coefficient of a, and then you halve it, and then you square. So what is the coefficient of a? -6. You halve it, and then you do what? You square. And this is equals to -3 square. -3 square. So you have that coefficient of a, and then you square that coefficient of a. And after doing that, then you come and do what? Add it on both sides. Both sides. So it will now be step number 3. A square minus 6a plus -3 all over 2, sorry, -3 square equals to 25 plus -3 square. Then on the left, you do what? You write the binomial square. Binomial square. So what is our binomial square? So it is a minus 3, and then we do what? Square equals to 25 plus -3 square. And this 25 is 25 plus what? Plus what? Plus 9. Which is equals to? Which is equals to? Which is equals to 34. It's equals to. So therefore, a minus 3 square equals to what? 34. Then we use the what? Now step number 4. The what? The square root property. And the square root property now will be a minus 3 equals to plus or minus the square root of. And then now we take 3 to the what? The other side. So a equals to 3 plus or minus the square root of 34. In your exam, you can leave it like that. But in Newton, you now do what? A equals to 3 plus the root of 34 over 3 minus the root of 34. Are we together? That clear? Time is moving so fast. Now, if it is of the form, if now it is of the form 2m squared plus 2m plus 34 equals to 0. Solve that one by use of continuous. So what is our first step? What is our first step? What is our first step? What is the first step? Divide by the coefficient of x squared. So you divide each one of them by the coefficient of x squared. And we get m squared plus m plus what? 17 equals to. The second step is what? Isolate the variable and the constant. So m squared plus m equals to minus 17. What is our third step? Identify the coefficient of m. And our coefficient of m there is 1. And then you do what? Half. And then you square. So it will now be half. Then you square. And then you do what here? You add on both sides. So m squared plus m plus half square equals to minus 17 plus a half square. So the left side now becomes a trinomial. So you write it as a binomial square. So it will be m plus 1 over 2 square equals to 17 plus what? Minus 17 plus 1 over 4. Minus 17 plus 1 over 4. So what is, so this is equals to minus 67 all over 1. So this is equals to minus 67. So 17 times 4 is 61. But then plus that one. So you should get, yes, you should get minus 67 all over. Now, using the square roots property, then our m plus 1 all over 2 square equals to minus 67 all over 4. So therefore, our m plus 1 over 2 equals to plus or minus the square root of minus 67 all over what? 67. Now, what is our m? So our m equals to what? We take this one to the other side. So minus 1 over 2 plus or minus the square root of minus 67 all over 1. So what is the square root of minus 67 all over 4? Square root of that. So this is basically m equals to minus 1 over 2 plus or minus the square root of negative 1 is what? The square root of what? 67. Divided by what? Because we can get the square root of 1, the square root of 67, which we don't know, divided by the square root of 4, which will now be 2. This is our final answer. So that is it. So in Newton, you separate by what? So you take the plus. Any question after that? So the only thing you need to remember here is this sign. First of all, this is not even the sign. So what you need to remember is mostly you are just given an equation like this. Let's say ax squared plus bx plus c equals to 0. So the only thing you need to remember here is 1. Make coefficient of x squared to be equals to 1. That is the first step. So you make sure that the coefficient of x squared is 1 when you're using completing squares. Number 2, you also check the sign here. The coefficient of x is all of that. If it is minus, so you make sure you consider minus. If it is plus, it is okay with that. So the sign of coefficient of what? Of x. The coefficient of x. After doing what? After dividing by the coefficient of x squared. So first of all, you make sure that the coefficient of x squared here is 1. Is 1. So dividing that, then you take this one the other side, and then you identify the coefficient of x with a sign, and then you square it, you halve it, and then you square it, and then you add to both sides. Add to both sides. Okay, I have a quiz for you to do it over the weekend. So it's due on Monday. You can discuss with a friend. I'll send the quiz to each one of you online.
Okay.
I will put that. I'll leave it in 2 minutes.
Wait, what?
I will see you in 1
Okay.
minute. Okay, I will post the quiz in Moodle. 1 to 6.